Hello and welcome to Jumping Geopolitics, my short series where I have quick 10-minute conversations with women who are doing amazing work around the world. My name is Emily Prey, and I'm a senior analyst at the New Lines Institute in Washington, D.C. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Pari Ibrahim, the founder and executive director of the Free Yezidi Foundation, about the conviction of a former ISIS member in a German court for the Yazidi Genocide. Thank you so much for joining me, Pari.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
So can you tell us briefly, why is this conviction so significant?
Well, this is the first conviction in court on the genocide charges for the Yazidi community. We haven't seen that over the last 7 years. So this is basically, it confirms a historical record to the public that individual accountability of certain crimes, atrocities can happen, and people are being convicted for those crimes they committed. And this is very important because when the genocide against the Yazidi community started in 2014, we as Yazidis were constantly saying, this is a genocide. And people were saying to us, well, we need to investigate whether that's true or not. And then after the investigation, we will find out whether it's a genocide. So basically, prevention of genocide wasn't there for the Yazidi community. But this shows in court that we do not have to prove anymore that this was a genocide. It is clear, evidence is there that this was a genocide against Yazidis, and it is a symbol for other courts around the world, and to people that international humanitarian law and international criminal law convictions are possible when the evidence is gathered, and that's why this is such an important conviction.
It is incredibly significant, as you say, that an individual can be recognized in this way, but also that it's not just about one man, it's about ISIS as a whole, and about the recognition in a court of law that the Yazidis have been facing genocide for years. And a lot of times people talk about that in the past tense, but it's an ongoing genocide. There are still over 2,000 women and girls who are missing, and that's the insidious nature of this crime, is that it doesn't end. There's not a stop date. It continues to harm victims for generations after the fact. So this was really, really great news last week for all of us who have been following this. Do you think now that other countries will follow Germany's example in using the legal principles of universal jurisdiction, whether, again, in the case of the Yazidis or also in the case of the Rohingya or Uyghurs?
Well, this is not very clear. So we talked to many countries about this and also about the recent verdict in Germany. Many don't want to do that. In the Yazidi case, national jurisdiction is also very crucial. Just in Iraq and in different countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, there are thousands of perpetrators that came from these European countries, and their own courts should charge these international crimes, and not only for terrorism, which they're doing right now. They should charge them for actual crimes that were committed aside from terrorism, like genocide, like crimes against humanity, rape, murder of the Yazidi community, slave trade as well. Of course, we hope that other persecuted groups like the Rohingya, like the Uyghur community, and others will have their day in court, will have a chance to get justice for their community, and specifically for the genocide that is committed against them. Universal jurisdiction is very important, and we applaud the German authorities for doing so. But what about the individuals from Belgium, UK, Netherlands, France that just come back to their own countries and pretend as if nothing happened, because there's not too much evidence at this moment? And of course, like, we also have to remember that the case in Germany, the Taha AJ case, shows again that this was a lucky conviction. His wife, Jennifer Vanish, she told someone who she thought was like a fellow ISIS member about the crime. And this person who she was telling to was an FBI informant. So That is how the conversation was recorded, and this was golden evidence, and this was how this case could go into court. But how many of these kind of crimes have been committed without the good luck of having to find that evidence that is necessary? It's really a needle in a haystack, and that's why we try to work to find that evidence, especially Yazidi organizations, to ensure that we have our day in court. But again, if universal jurisdiction is possible, that is great, because we see that in Iraq, the justice system is not up to international standards. So if perpetrators are now heading towards Europe as refugees, they need to stand trial for what they've done to the Yazidis. And I believe me when I say there are thousands of ISIS perpetrators who have now migrated to Europe and are there as pretending to be regular civilians, but we're within the ISIS, the Islamic State.
It's, as you said, incredibly lucky that we had all of this evidence that we were able to find to make this conviction. And it is the work of organizations like your own, Free Yezidi Foundation, that makes all of this possible. So looking at gender, it was a crucial aspect in the way that ISIS planned and carried out its genocide against the Yazidi population. So a unique aspect of this genocide was that there was killing, yes, but there was also separation of children from families. There was sexual violence, prevention of births within the group by occupying their wombs, forced labor, and other non-lethal genocidal acts intended to bring about the destruction of the group. Does this case in Germany signal a greater understanding in the legal world, in the political world, that genocide can be and is more than instances of mass killing?
Definitely, absolutely, and I think, and that's why we applaud the German court, because, and I was recently also speaking to the prosecution office of Germany. I think there is a trend in the world generally that sexual violence and crimes against women are not acceptable. That's why we also have this Me Too movement. I mean, I support that 100%. I myself am a survivor of sexual abuse during my childhood, and I had to go through a court process. It is very, very difficult, and we see communities around the world, they're starting to reject the idea that men can actually abuse and violate women. So I think this carries over to the international law. So when ISIS came to destroy the Yazidis, as part of their action, as part of their intent, their planning, and their killing, the sexual violence and the systematic way the women were treated was very clear, and they had planned all of these things. Women over a certain age, they were killed, and others were taken and eventually sold as sex slaves in ISIS territory, Syria or Iraq. There was very much an intent to not only murder the Yazidi community, the men in the community, but afterwards, as you said in the beginning of this conversation, the genocide is still ongoing. And why is that? Because the crimes that are being committed against Yazidi women is still ongoing. Our women, as you said, more than 2,700 women and girls, women and children are still in captivity. They are suffering from what is happening in 2014 and what is still ongoing today. We are looking for jurisdiction everywhere. And the best thing would be that what we see is that genocide is the crime that people are being charged for, but also those crimes that are related to that, which are violence against women, slave trade, etc., gender crimes. And that is so important for the Yazidi community, because we have suffered immensely and are still suffering from those crimes against our women and girls.
Pari, I want to thank you so much for your time, for coming on Gender and Geopolitics on the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the victims of the crime of genocide and the prevention of this crime. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your analysis here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.